The desert highway baked under a merciless Arizona sun. Heat shimmered rose off the asphalt like a dying breath. On this lonely stretch, where the only movement was the occasional tumbleweed and the relentless crawl of vultures high above, a single motorcycle sat pulled onto the gravel shoulder. Its rider, an elderly man named Silas Thorne, leaned against the warm chrome, his face a road map of wrinkles etched deep by decades of sun and wind. He wore worn leathers, patched jeans, and boots scarred by time, just a tired old man on a vintage Harley, seemingly insignificant in the vast emptiness. Enter Officer Derek Vance, young, with the swagger of someone who believes the badge grants ultimate authority. His cruiser, lights still flashing a garish blue and red against the beige landscape, blocked the motorcycle. Vance approached, thumbs hooked in his belt, a sneer already forming. License and registration. Pops, didn't see you weaving back there? Or maybe you just forgot how to ride that relic. His voice dripped with condescension. Silas moved slowly, deliberately, his hands visible. He pulled a worn leather wallet from his jacket. Vance snatched it, barely glancing at the ID. Thorne? Means nothing to me. Step away from the bike. We're gonna do a little inspection. Looks like it might not even be roadworthy. The challenge wasn't about traffic laws. It was about power, about Vance asserting dominance over someone he deemed weak, invisible. Silas remained silent, his pale blue eyes fixed on a point far beyond the arrogant cop. Vance mistook it for fear, for confusion. He chuckled, turning to his partner, a younger, more hesitant officer. See, Miller? This is why this job's easy. They just fold. He tossed Silas's license onto the dusty ground. Pick it up, old-timer. Show some respect. The injustice hung thick in the air. Silas didn't flinch at the insult, didn't rush to retrieve his dignity from the dirt. He simply stared at Vance, a quiet intensity building in his gaze that Vance was too blinded by arrogance to notice. Miller shifted uncomfortably. Sarge, maybe we just... Vance cut him off. Maybe we just do our job. Rookie, this junk heat probably stashed something. Start looking. As Miller reluctantly approached the motorcycle, Vance leaned closer to Silas, invading his space. What's the matter, Gramps? Cat got your tongue? Or you just too old to remember how to speak? Silas finally moved, not to pick up the license, not to argue. With deliberate, unhurried calm, he reached inside his jacket again. Vance's hand flew to his holster. Whoa, easy there. What you got? Silas slowly withdrew not a weapon, but a small, old-fashioned flip phone. Ancient technology. Vance barked a laugh. Genuine amusement now. What are you gonna do? Call your grandkids? Tell him you got busted by the big bad cop. Silas ignored him. His gnarled thumb moved with surprising dexterity, pressing a single pre-programmed number. He held the phone to his ear. His voice, when he spoke, was low, gravelly, but carried an unmistakable weight. Code Black, Route 87, Marker 114. Immediate hostile engagement. He snapped the phone shut. Vance stared, momentarily thrown. Code Black? Hostile engagement? What kind of senile fantasy is this? You threatening an officer? But Silas just returned his gaze to the horizon. The faint drone grew louder, morphing into a distinct, heavy thrumming. Not a car, not a truck. Miller was the first to see it, pointing a trembling finger south. Sarge, look. Vance turned. On the horizon, a dark smudge appeared, resolving rapidly into a convoy. Not police cruisers. Military vehicles. Humvees, armored personnel carriers. Kicking up a massive plume of dust. They were moving fast, incredibly fast, converging directly on the roadside scene. Vance's sneer vanished, replaced by dawning confusion, then a flicker of primal fear. What the hell? The convoy didn't slow. It roared off the highway, armored vehicles maneuvering with terrifying precision, surrounding the cruiser, the motorcycle, the two cops. Tires screeched on gravel. Engines growled like caged beasts. Soldiers poured out, clad in desert camo, rifles held at the ready, forming a tight, disciplined perimeter. Their faces were grim, professional, radiating lethal intent. The air crackled with tension, thick with the smell of diesel and weapon oil. The door of the lead Humvee opened. A man stepped out, his bearing radiating authority even before you saw the insignia. Captain Marcus Webb. His eyes scanned the scene instantly. The cowering rookie cop, the stunned and suddenly pale Vance, and the elderly man standing impassively amidst the armored might. Webb strode directly towards Silas Thorne. Vance found his voice, shaky but trying to reclaim control. "Captain, thank God you're here." This individual was resisting, made threats, possibly armed. Webb didn't even glance at him. He stopped before Silas and snapped a razor-sharp salute. "General Thorne, sir." "Captain Webb, 10th Mountain Division, rapid response. We have the situation contained, sir." "Your orders." The words hit Vance like physical blows. "General?" The blood drained from his face. Miller actually took a step back, mouth agape. The frail old man on the busted motorcycle. Was it General? The soldiers tightened their grips on their weapons, their eyes now fixed on Vance with chilling hostility. The power shift was absolute, seismic, and utterly humiliating. General Thorne finally looked away from the horizon and met Captain Webb's eyes. He returned the salute with a slow, deliberate grace that spoke of a lifetime of command. Only then did his gaze settle on Officer Vance. It wasn't angry. It was disappointed, cold, the look of a man who had seen true tyranny and recognized its petty echo in a bully with a badge. Vance shriveled under that gaze, the weight of his monumental error crushing him. He instinctively stepped back, bumping into his cruiser. Thorne spoke, his voice cutting through the desert stillness like a knife. "Captain, secure these officers' weapons. Detain them." He gestured toward the license still lying in the dust. Vance scrambled, falling to his knees, frantically grabbing for plastic card, fumbling to wipe the dirt off. "General, sir, I had no idea. A terrible mistake, sir. Please." Thorne watched him grovel. No triumph in his eyes, only a weary understanding of human frailty and the abuse of power. "A mistake, Officer Vance?" Thorne's voice was quiet, yet carried over the idling engines. Underestimating someone based on appearance? Mistaking patience for weakness? That isn't a mistake. That is a fatal flaw. Power, he paused, letting the word hang, is never an excuse for cruelty. And true strength, he looked pointedly at Vance, now trembling on the ground, rarely needs to announce itself with a siren. As Captain Webb personally removed Vance's service weapon and cuffed his hands behind his back with cold efficiency, the lesson resonated like a gong. Justice, swift and absolute, had descended on this lonely stretch of asphalt. The arrogant predator was now the caged prey. Vance, stripped of his authority, humiliated before his rookie partner and a platoon of hardened soldiers, could only stare at the ground, the reality of his downfall crashing over him. Miller stood frozen, a stark lesson in the consequences of blind obedience. The audience feels a catharsis, the sweet sting of the underdog revealed as the ultimate authority, the bully utterly dismantled. But as Captain Webb finished securing Vance and turned back to the general for further orders, Thorne's ancient flip phone buzzed insistently in his jacket pocket. He pulled it out, flipping it open. He listened for only a few seconds. The weathered lines of his face, moments ago etched with stoic command, suddenly tightened. The blood seemed to drain from beneath his tan. His knuckles turned white around the phone. The icy composure shattered, replaced by something raw, something close to panic. He looked sharply at Captain Webb, his voice dropping to a low, urgent whisper the microphones could barely catch, yet laden with dread. "Webb, it's Eva. They've taken her. They know." He snapped the phone shut, his eyes scanning the surrounding desert hills not with strategy, but with the desperate terror of a grandfather. The soldiers, sensing the shift, tensed, rifles coming up, scanning the barren landscape. The satisfying victory curdled instantly into chilling uncertainty. Who were they? Who was Eva? And what darkness had just reached out to touch the formidable General Thorne? Captain Webb froze mid-stride, the desert heat suddenly replaced by an icy dread radiating from General Thorne. Taken? Eva? Who, sir? Thorne's weathered face, moments ago the picture of stoic command, was now etched with raw, paternal terror. He ignored Webb's question, his pale blue eyes scanning the barren hills not for tactical advantage, but for any flicker of his granddaughter. They know I'm reactivated. Thorne rasped, the words tasting like ash. This isn't random. This is a message. He slammed the ancient flip phone shut, the sound like a gunshot in the sudden silence. The soldiers, hardened professionals, instinctively tightened their grips on their rifles, barrels sweeping the desolate landscape. The satisfying justice served on Vance curdled into chilling vulnerability. Officer Vance, wrist bound behind his back near the cruiser, saw the shift. A sliver of his old arrogance resurfaced through his fear. "See," he spat towards Miller, his voice trembling but defiant. "Told you he was trouble. Now his family's mixed up in it." Captain Webb spun, his face a mask of fury. "Shut him up." A soldier clamped a hand over Vance's mouth, silencing him with a brutal efficiency that promised worse. Thorne moved, not the slow, deliberate pace of the underestimated old man, but with the lethal grace of a predator unleashed. He yanked open the Humvee door. "Webb, with me, now." His voice, stripped of its earlier gravel, was a whip-crack of command. Inside the vehicle, Thorne pulled a rugged, encrypted laptop from a secure compartment beneath the seat. His gnarled fingers flew across the keys, bypassing layers of security with terrifying speed. Satellite feeds flickered on the screen, infrared, terrain mapping. He isolated a cluster of heat signatures moving fast, away from the highway, deep into the canyons north of Marker 114. There, he stabbed a finger at the screen. 3 vehicles. 10 minutes head start. Rugged terrain. Air support. Webb asked, already keying his radio. "Negative," Thorne snapped. "Too visible. They'll expect that. They want a spectacle." He zoomed in on the satellite feed, his eyes narrowing on a specific, narrow box canyon branching off the main route. Ambush point. Here. Classic chokehold. He looked at Webb, the terror for Eva now channeled into a cold, terrifying focus. "They know my protocols, Captain. They knew exactly where to intercept me. This is personal." A name, unspoken but heavy, hung between them. Project Chimera, Thorne's classified op from the shadowy Cold War days. An op buried so deep, only ghosts and traitors remembered. "Move," Thorne ordered. 2 heavily armed Humvees peeled off the perimeter, kicking up a dust storm as they roared back onto the highway, then veered violently onto a near-invisible track leading into the labyrinthine canyons. Thorne drove the lead vehicle himself, handling the rugged terrain with the skill of a man half his age, pushing the machine to its limits. Webb, gripping the dashboard, radio coordinates to the remaining soldiers. Hold position. Secure the prisoners. Maintain radio silence unless compromised. Inside the lurching Humvee, the tension was suffocating. The canyon walls rose like prison bars, casting deep, ominous shadows. Thorne's eyes constantly flicked between the treacherous track and the GPS marker tracking Eva's signal, a tiny beacon embedded in a locket he'd given her. It was moving deeper into the trap. "They're hurting us, sir," Webb stated grimly. "They control the high ground." Thorne didn't answer. His jaw was set like granite. He knew the cost of Chimera. Betrayals. Sacrifices. Men he'd trusted turned. Men he'd eliminated. Had one crawled out of the grave? They rounded a final bend, the canyon narrowing dramatically. Thorne slammed the brakes. Ahead, the track ended abruptly at a sheer rock face. Blocking the dead end were 3 battered SUVs, doors open, empty. Silence. Utter, oppressive silence. The heat was a physical weight. "It's a dead end," Webb hissed, scanning the cliffs above through his scope. "Where are they?" Then a sound. Faint, terrified. Eva, coming from a dark fissure in the canyon wall. A cave mouth, partially obscured by boulders. Thorne was out of the Humvee before Webb could react. Sidearm drawn, moving towards the cave with deadly intent. "Eva, I'm here," he shouted, his voice raw. A harsh, amplified voice boomed from the cliffs above, echoing mockingly. "Hello, Silas. Took you long enough." Still sentimental. Still predictable. A figure stepped into view on a high ledge, silhouetted against the harsh sky. Not a soldier, dressed in dark, nondescript tactical gear, face obscured by a mask. He held a compact assault rifle casually. Below him, two more figures emerged, weapons trained down on Thorn and Webb. But Thorn only had eyes for the cave. A masked man dragged Eva out, kicking and sobbing. She was terrified but unharmed. For now, let the girl go, Kale, Thorn said, his voice dangerously low. He recognized the voice, the posture. Marcus Kale, codename Wraith, Thorn's own protege on Project Chimera. Presumed dead in the Berlin extraction gone wrong 25 years ago. Betrayal confirmed. The ultimate insult. The student targeting the master's heart. You always were soft, Silas. Kale's voice dripped with contempt. Sentimentality is weakness. You taught me that before you try to bury me. Chimera's secrets are worth a fortune. And your granddaughter, she's my insurance policy. Throw down your weapons. Both of you, or the child loses an eye. Slowly, Webb raised his rifle toward the ledge, but the angles were impossible. Kale and his men held every advantage. Thorn stood exposed, his weapon pointed uselessly at the man holding Eva. The mighty general, who commanded armies minutes ago, was now pinned down, outmaneuvered by a ghost from his darkest past. His greatest strength, his love for Eva, was now his crippling weakness. Kale smiled beneath his mask. Power shifts, Silas. Remember, you have none here. Just choices. Bad ones. Thorn's shoulders slumped slightly. He looked broken, defeated. He slowly, agonizingly, started to lower his sidearm towards the dusty ground. Webb stared in disbelief. No, Eva whimpered. Grandpa? Kale's masked head tilted in triumph. The powerful figure who humbled the arrogant cop was now submitting. The underdog had become the cornered animal. Justice seemed a million miles away. But as the pistol dipped below his waistline, Thorn's boot heel scraped loudly against a specific patch of gravel. A sound lost on everyone but Webb. It was a signal. An ancient signal from Project Chimera's most desperate contingencies. Code, groundfall. Webb's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. It wasn't surrender. It was a countdown. Thorn's gaze snapped up not to Kale, but directly to Webb. In that split second, his eyes weren't defeated. They were volcanic. They screamed one silent, desperate order. Now, the canyon became a deafening echo chamber. Thorn's boot scrape. Code. Groundfall wasn't surrender. It was detonation. Captain Webb, trained in Chimera's deadliest protocols, reacted faster than thought. Before Kale's triumphant sneer could fully form, Webb slammed his palm onto a hidden panel inside the Humvee. Not a weapon. A signal. Simultaneous. Blinding white light and concussive thunder erupted behind Kale's men on the ledge and beside the cave entrance. Webb had covertly planted microcharges during their frantic approach. The world dissolved into searing light and disorienting noise. The masked man holding Eva cried out, stumbling backward, his grip loosening. Thorn was already a shadow in motion. While Kale's men reeled, blinded and deafened, Thorn lunged past the cave entrance, not towards Eva, but towards a specific, weather-beaten boulder 10 feet away. He slammed his fist against a seemingly random fissure. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a biometric scanner. He pressed his palm flat. Deep within the canyon wall, machinery untouched for decades grown to life. A section of rock face, perfectly camouflaged, slid aside with grinding protest. Not an escape route. An armory. Inside, bathed in eerie emergency lighting, stood racks of weapons unlike anything Webb had ever seen. Sleek, matte black casings, glowing blue power cores. Project Chimera's legacy. Weapons designed for a shadow war that never went hot. Kale, partially shielded, recovered fastest. He saw the opening armory, saw Thorn grabbing one of the sleek, alien-looking rifles. Rage and recognition warred in his voice. No. You monster. You still have them. He swung his assault rifle towards Eva, held dazed by his blinded comrade. I burned for those. Webb opened fire from the Humvee, pinning Kale down, forcing him to take cover. But the man holding Eva raised a sidearm. pressing it against her temple, his eyes wide with panic and pain. Thorn emerged from the armory, the Chimera rifle humming with gathering power. Its barrel glowed an intense, unnatural blue. He didn't aim at the man holding Eva. He aimed past him at the canyon wall behind the cave entrance. His face was stone, but his eyes held the haunted knowledge of a man unleashing something damned. Eva, his voice cut through the chaos, calm, commanding, "Close your eyes. Now." The rifle discharged. Not a bullet. A searing lance of coherent blue-white energy. It struck the canyon wall not with an explosion, but with terrifying silence. The rock didn't shatter. It dissolved. A section the size of a truck vaporized instantly into superheated dust. The effect was localized, surgical, yet horrifying. The shockwave wasn't concussive force, but a wave of intense, debilitating heat and blinding light. Spectral fire. The masked man holding Eva screamed, an unearthly sound as the energy washed at him. Not burning, but unmaking. His weapon clattered to ground as his body convulsed, flesh seeming to ripple and distort under the invisible assault. He collapsed, twitching, eyes wide and vacant. Eva, eyes squeezed shut as ordered, stumbled forward, coughing, instinctively running towards her grandfather's voice. Kale, shielded by the rock ledge, stared in primal terror at his convulsing man, then at the smoldering, perfectly smooth cavity in the canyon wall. The power shift was absolute, terrifying. Thorn wasn't just a general. He was the keeper of nightmares. Spectral fire. Kale shrieked, the name a curse. You promise is destroyed. Thorn swept Eva behind him. The Chimera rifle now trained unerringly on Kale's position. The low hum was building again. Promises to traitors mean nothing, Marcus, Thorn growled, his voice thick with fury and the ghost of past betrayals. Berlin was your choice. You sold Chimera. You sold us. He remembered the extraction gone wrong, the ambush, the screams of his team as Kale's betrayal became clear, the weapons Data Kale stole, and tried to sell nearly ignited World War III. Thorn had hunted him, cornered him in that Berlin factory, the fire, the body never found. You should have stayed dead. Kale, driven by terror of the weapon and burning hatred, hurled a smoke grenade onto the canyon floor. Thick, acrid smoke billowed up, obscuring the ledge. This isn't over, Silas. Kale's voice echoed, fading, moving. They know about the girl. They know what you did. What you really did in Vladivostok. Boots scrambled on rock, retreating. Webb fired blind into the smoke, but the sounds faded rapidly up a hidden escape route. The smoke slowly dissipated. Kale and his one surviving accomplice were gone, vanished into the labyrinthine canyon network. Only the smoldering rock face, the twitching, mindless husk of the masked man, and the terrified whimpers of Eva remained. Thorn lowered the humming rifle, the blue glow fading. He turned, kneeling, pulling Eva into a fierce, trembling embrace. You're safe, Rabbit. Grandpa's got you. Safe. But his eyes scanned the cliffs, haunted. They know about the girl. Webb approached, his face pale. Sir, Vladivostok? What did he mean? Thorn didn't answer immediately. He gently wiped dust from Eva's tear-streaked face. The mighty general, who wielded impossible power, looked suddenly ancient again, burdened by monstrous secrets. Things buried for a reason, Captain, he rasped. Things that should stay buried. He looked down at the Chimera rifle, not as a weapon, but as a curse. This was the least of what Chimera created. Eva trembled in his arms, her gaze shifting from her grandfather's weary face to the sleek, terrifying weapon beside him. She'd felt the heat, heard the scream, seen the man fall. Not killed, unmade. Her voice, small and shattered, cut through the desert stillness. Grandpa, that light, that man, what did you do to him? Her question wasn't about the rescue. It was about the monster she saw unleashed. The loving grandfather and the wielder of spectral fire collided in her terrified eyes. Thorn flinched as if struck. The true cause of his power, the horror reflected in his granddaughter's eyes. It was a wound deeper than any Kale could inflict. His secret was out, not to the world, to Eva, and she was terrified of him. Before Thorn could form an answer, Webb's radio shrieked. The transmission was frantic, laced with static. Beacon 6 to ground fall. Multiple fast movers incoming. No transponders. Bearing direct to your location. They came out of nowhere. ETA 90 seconds. Orders. Thorne's head snapped up. Kale's escaped his warning. It was a diversion. The real players had arrived. Players who could track Chimera signatures. Players who knew about Vladivostok. They weren't here for him. They were here for the armory. For the weapons. And Eva was still right in the kill zone. Thorne shoved Eva towards Webb. Get her to the secondary extraction point. Now, coordinates Delta 09er. He snatched up the Chimera rifle, its hum rising again like an angry wasp. Go, Webb. That's an order. He turned toward the canyon mouth, where the first specks of high-speed aircraft were already screaming over the distant ridges. The canyon, moments ago a trap for Kale, was about to become a crucible. Thorne stood alone before the open armory, facing the sky, alone, aging sentinel guarding Pandora's box, ready to unleash hell to protect a granddaughter who now feared him. The ghosts of Chimera had risen, and they brought friends with jet engines. Who are the jet fighters? What happened in Vladivostok? Why is Eva terrified of her grandpa? Like if your jaw dropped at the spectral fire. Subscribe. The Sky Attack and Thorne's Last Stand. What is Chimera's darkest secret? Comment theories now.